Hello, hello. We are starting chapter 11 today, which is on logic. Now, some of you will love this chapter because you're very logical people, and this will just make sense. And it's a lot different than finding surface area and volume. However, others of you who still might be logical will struggle with this chapter and you're not going to like it. Regardless, it's a lot different and logic's important. So here we go. We're going to learn about logic. So this is kind of similar to what we covered in the first semester. If you remember, we did conditionals, we did the converse, we did true conditionals, we did counterexamples, and that's similar to what we're going to be looking at here in chapter 11, along those same ideas, but we're just going to take them a bit further. So you're going to want to print out the chapter 11 test guide. So that's on Moodle. And today we're going to start out with some basic definitions and stuff to get you started. So the first one is the law of detachment. From a true conditional. Remember, true conditional means there's no counterexamples. P implies Q. And a statement or given information P. You may conclude Q. All right, that's a really mathematical way of saying that if you have a true conditional, if you know P is true, then Q must also be true. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's take a true conditional that we covered recently. If in any triangle ABC, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then triangle ABC is a right triangle. All right, the Pythagorean theorem. So that's a true conditional. Means there's no counterexamples. And if you were given a triangle, so let's say I gave you a triangle, and you got sides 3, 4, and 5, so it's a Pythagorean triple. And so you know that a squared plus b squared c squared, 9 plus 16 is 25. Then you can conclude this has to be a right triangle. So that's what this is saying. This is just the basic of the basics. You got true conditional, you know P is true, statement P. You got a triangle ABC where this is true, then it must be a right triangle. All right, the law of transitivity. You can probably guess this because we've done the transitive property. If P implies Q and Q implies P, sorry, Q implies R are true, what do you suppose you can conclude? Then P implies R is true. Law of transitivity. All right, a few more terms. Negation. Negation means not. So the symbol is this squiggly, and so symbolically we'll write, so the negation of P we will write as not P. So if P is this statement up here, and then you write any triangle ABC, a squared plus b squared is c squared, not P would be that a squared plus b squared was not c squared. Okay, so a negation means the opposite. All right, inverse is not P implies not Q. So if we were doing the inverse of the Pythagorean theorem, we would say if triangle AB, if in any triangle ABC, a squared plus b squared is not c squared, so there's a negation of P, then triangle ABC is not a right triangle. So if it's not right, it's either going to be acute or obtuse. So you could write that too. You could say, then triangle ABC is an acute or obtuse triangle. That would be saying the same things in different words. So is this true? Actually, yes, it is. But it doesn't always have to be true. The inverse of a true conditional does not have to be true. So let's put that in a note here. Inverse of true conditional doesn't have to be true. Can be, doesn't have to be. All right, then the contrapositive. The contrapositive is not Q implies not P. So looking back at our true conditional we started with, not Q implies not P. If triangle ABC is not a right triangle, then a squared plus b squared is not equal to c squared. And this is true. And the key is that this is actually the next point. For the law of contrapositive, the contrapositive and the conditional always go together. So if the conditional is true, so is the contrapositive. And if the conditional is false, so is the contrapositive. In other words, they go together all the time. That's a law. The law of contrapositive. Okay, so here's a little example. I believe this comes from Lewis Carroll. Lewis Carroll wrote The Looking Glass, the Alice in Wonderland story. He loved logic. And so this is a little logic puzzle. And the way you saw, so here we got three statements. Babies are illogical. Any person who can manage an alligator is not despised. And illogical persons are despised. In the puzzle, to solve it, you have to get these three statements all into one statement that's logically equivalent. to the 3. I'll show you how to do this. So one technique is to change each of these statements into a conditional. So for example, babies are illogical. I'll use B for babies. So if you are a baby, that implies you're not logical, right? So if L means logical, B is baby. So if you're a baby, that implies you're not logical. Any person who can manage an alligator is not despised. So if you can manage an alligator, that implies that you're not despised. So over here, I'll add A, means you can manage an alligator. And D means you're despised. All right, and then illogical persons are despised. So if you're not logical, that means you're despised. So now we're going to use some of these rules that we've been covering to solve this simple puzzle. The first rule we're going to use is transitivity. So you can think a sec how we can do that. So transitivity, if P implies Q and Q implies R, then P implies R. So here we have B implies not L implies D. So that means we can conclude from these two statements that B implies D. So we're taking these two statements here, this one, and they're combining to this one through transitivity. If P implies Q and Q implies R, then P implies R. So that's how that works. So now we've taken these two statements and we've got this one, and now we're taking this statement we didn't combine yet. So we've got these two statements left, and we got to make this into one. So we have babies are despised, and alligators, if you can manage an alligator, you're not despised. So here we're going to use the law of contrapositive. So we're going to actually switch this bottom one. Instead of A implies not D, the contrapositive is D implies not A. Right? So A implies not D. The contrapositive, you take not Q. So in this case, I know it's kind of confusing. So we're looking at, the contrapositive of P implies Q is not Q implies not P, right? So in our case, the not D is filling the Q position. So we're going to do a not D implies a not A. So two negations, just like in grammar, a double negative gives you that positive. So not D is just D. And then not A obviously is not A. So now we have, so this one has been rewritten. So now we're down to these two statements. And if we take a look at that a second, what rule are we going to apply now? The transitive property again, right? Here's your P implies Q, Q implies R, so P implies R. So these two statements are going to combine to give you B implies not A, which means babies, if you are a baby, then you cannot manage an alligator. So that's your answer. So you'd write that as a statement. Babies cannot manage alligators. All right, now that might sound very apparent, but it's just a demonstration of a interesting kind of logic puzzle. We'll be looking at those more. Now I'm going to show you a different kind of logic puzzle. It's based on same ideas, just in a completely different way. So this is also on Moodle. And I'm going to go through some of the clues, give you an idea how these things work, and then you can see if you can solve it. So what we've got here is the scenario. You've got 5 people, Jalen, Nelson, Philip, Seth, and Shelby. And they're related to 5 different celebrities: Billy Crystal, Danny DeVito, Richard Gere, Robert Duvall, and Tom Hanks. And so one person is related to one, so it's a mutually exclusive thing. And then they're each involved in teaching art. They either teach art, English, history, home ec, or woodshop. And then they have wake-up calls at different times. And so you're trying to figure out which person has which wake-up call, with which teaches which subject is related to which celebrity. And so the grid is set up this way so that, well, you'll see as you fill out the clues. So I'm going to go through some of the clues, and then I'll kind of show you how to do it. So circle means this is an association, and an X means this cannot be an association. So here we go. The person who taught English is not Jalen. So you find Jalen and you find English, and so Jalen does not teach English. That's what that's saying. All right, the 5 people, so this means we have 5 different people. So you've got a 7:30 wake-up call, the person who taught woodshop. So this means the person who woke up at 7:30 is not the same person that taught woodshop. So you can put an X here. So 7:30 person is not woodshop, because these are 5 distinct people: the 7:30 wake-up call person, the woodshop person. Then the 7:30 person is not Billy Crystal's cousin. So 7:30 Billy Crystal, nope, not happening. The 7:30 person is not Seth. Okay, so 7:30 Seth, not happening. And the one with the 8:30 wake-up call. So obviously the 7:30 wake-up call can't be the 8:30 wake-up call. Those things are different. So I took 7:30 and I crossed off each one that couldn't be. So now I'm going to do the person who taught woodshop is not Billy Crystal. So now we look at Billy Crystal and woodshop, that's here. And then the woodshop person is not Seth. So Seth, woodshop, here. And then the one with the 8:30 wake-up call is not woodshop either. So 8:30 woodshop. So you're seeing here how having the grid set up this way is useful to eliminate possibilities. All right, now we got Billy Crystal's cousin is not Seth. So Billy Crystal and Seth. Seth, Billy Crystal here. Billy Crystal's cousin is not the one with the 8:30 wake-up call. So that's here. And then Seth doesn't have the 8:30 wake-up call. Seth, 8:30. Okay, so that's how you work through those clues in an order so you can eliminate everything. Clue number 3, the person who taught history, and you can kind of, if you want to, you can X out clues if you never have to go back to them, meaning like there's no new information you can get there. The person who taught history has an earlier wake-up call than Jalen. So obviously Jalen doesn't teach history, because it says the person who taught history has an earlier wake-up call than Jalen. So Jalen doesn't teach history. That's the first thing you can get out of that. And then if that person has an earlier wake-up call than Jalen, then Jalen cannot have the earliest wake-up call. So she cannot be the 6:30 person. Likewise, the history person cannot be the latest wake-up time, because he or she has to wake up earlier than Jalen. So if they were here, then Jalen would be later than 8:30, and that's not a possibility. All right, so we have that clue. Number 4, either the person who taught home ec or the person who taught woodshop is Shelby. So this is saying Shelby either teaches home ec or woodshop. So Shelby, home ec or woodshop. So not the other 3, right? either the person who taught home ec or the person who taught woodshop is Shelby. Okay, number 5, the person who taught home ec isn't related to Danny DeVito. So home ec and Danny DeVito don't go together. The one with the 8 a.m. wake up call is Nelson. All right, so they tell you that. So 8 a.m. is Nelson. So no one else can wake up at 8, only Nelson. And Nelson can't wake up at any other time but 8. So you're going to get all those X's there. Of the person who taught woodshop and Jalen, one has a 6:30 a.m. wake-up call, and the other is Tom Hanks' cousin. So of the person who taught woodshop and Jalen, so those two distinct people, in other words, Jalen does not teach woodshop, right? Of the person who taught woodshop and Jalen, so these are 2 different people. One has a 6:30 wake-up call, and the other is Tom Hanks' cousin. Well, we know Jalen cannot have the 6:30 wake-up call. We already established that. So that means that she must be Tom Hanks' cousin. So we put a circle there, and then she's not related to any of these other guys, and Tom Hanks isn't related to any of the other people. So Jalen is Tom Hanks' cousin, and so then the 6:30 wake-up call person is the one who taught woodshop. So we got 6:30 a.m. woodshop, and then we're crossing everything else out here. And so you can use some other logic here that will be important, especially when we do more difficult puzzles. So the 6:30 a.m. wake-up person cannot be Nelson. We established that Nelson wakes up at 8. So the 6:30 wake-up person isn't Nelson. So Nelson cannot teach woodshop because the woodshop person works up at 6:30. So you can go down here, Nelson, and put an X here. So what we're gonna end up is like you can kind of make a little chart if you want. I'll show you that in a minute, maybe, to try to help you coordinate things. All right, Danny DeVito's cousin has an earlier wake-up call than the person who taught English. Well, we don't know who Danny DeVito's cousin is. It says, but we know that person doesn't teach English. So Danny DeVito and English do not go together. And it says Danny DeVito has an earlier wake-up call. So he can be in the earliest slot, but he can't be in the latest slot because it's earlier than the person who taught English. And the person who taught English, we know it's not the 6:30 slot. So we'll leave that there for now. All right, the one who with the 7:30 wake-up call didn't teach art. So 7:30, no art. Shelby has a later wake-up call than Philip. So Shelby is later than Philip. So same thing here. So Philip could be the earliest, but Shelby cannot, because Shelby has to be later than Philip. So Philip could be here, Shelby could be here, Philip could be here, Shelby could be here, Philip could be here, Shelby could be here, but Philip can't be the latest slot. Okay. And then the one with the 6:30 a.m. wake-up call is Robert Duvall's cousin. Okay, so 6:30 a.m. is Robert Duvall's cousin. Circle here. All right, so obviously we don't have the whole puzzle solved. We're gonna have to go back through it. But what I'm saying earlier is you can start grouping things together. So Robert D's cousin and 6:30 a.m. and woodshop all go together. So when you're looking through the clues, anywhere where you see Robert Duvall's 6:30 a.m. or woodshop, that's all referring to the same person. So let's see if there's an example of that. So here it says either the person who taught home ec or the person who taught woodshop is Shelby. Well, Shelby doesn't teach. So that means Shelby does not teach woodshop. Already have that. Oh no, we didn't. Yeah, okay, see, this is how it's going to help us, right? So Shelby, it tells us in clue 4 that Shelby either teaches home ec or woodshop. And we just said, okay, well, because Shelby didn't wake up at 6:30, that means she couldn't teach woodshop because those go together. So Shelby doesn't teach woodshop. She's not Robert Duvall's cousin either. But now we have a situation where Shelby can't teach art, English, history, or woodshop. There's only one possibility left, and that's home ec, right? Because it says here, either the person who taught home ec or the person who taught woodshop is Shelby. Well, she's not the woodshop person. She has to be the home ec person. And so that will clear that off. And now you notice here, Jalen doesn't have any options available besides art. So Jalen must teach art. Okay, so then you can say, okay, Jalen and art go together, and Tom Hanks. Right, so then you can look back and you can say any clue that has Jalen, art, and Tom Hanks together are all the same person. So that might help you. So go back through the clues, make a little chart like this maybe, see if you can figure out the answer to the puzzle. I know this is new, but this is kind of an easier puzzle. Okay, so work on that. That might interest you. And then over here, we've got the 11-1 homework. And we've got the 11-2 homework. So plenty to do to get started. So don't you love logic?